Jack!
Hello, people of the internet, and welcome to another episode of the Shuwatch podcast. I am your host, Andres Perez, aka Kaiju Noir, and here with me is a new individual on the Kaiju Noir channel, someone who I've wanted to have on here for a very long time. Give it up for Mr. Keith Foster.
Is this where I greet, like, people of Earth? People of Earth, hello. You said people of the internet. I'm going to go with people of Earth because that sounds a little bit more fun.
Funny enough, that's exactly where I got my sort of intro. It's like, I always liked the idea of, like, people of Earth, people of the internet, so I decided to, like, adopt that as, like, my main introduction ever since I started the channel.
Love it.
Thank you.
But no, it's a pleasure to be here. It's an honor to be here. We've shared some table space and shared, I think, a meal or two and a drink or two over the years. So it's good to be talking across the
Pacific
circumference
Ocean?
of the Earth, half the circumference of the Earth, something like that.
You pretty much, yeah, from one hemisphere of the Earth to the other, crossing international boundaries and borders and time zones, just to bring you, ladies and gentlemen, quality entertainment here. And
that's right.
So I'm pretty sure many people are like, who is this Keith Foster? Why does Andres Perez seem so happy to finally have this guy on his channel? Well, you see, folks, I've met Keith at G-Fest many years ago. I want to say it was 2014 or 2015. And he's the I wouldn't say the writer, and would you also call yourself the creator or lead creator of Kadoja?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think it's mainly due to attrition, right? That when we first started Kadoja in 2011, it was me doing the writing, and a gentleman named Rory Smith doing the interior pencils, and a person named Lance Pilgrim doing the covers, putting the issues together, et cetera, et cetera. Right. And since then, Rory has kind of graduated, I suppose. He has a full-time job in animation, and more power to him. And Lance, while he is still part of the Kadoja thing and still, very much involved, he's let me know that he would like to kind of gradually transition out. Okay. So he's going to serve as kind of background creative consultant while I learn the ropes from him on the things he was doing. Okay, so because it's just me and work for hire now, there you go. I am the extant creative force behind Kadoja.
All right. So as the creative force behind Kadoja, I've came across your booth in the Artist Alley, found your comic there, immediately bought all 5 issues of the first volume. Grew to enjoy it. I eventually reviewed the comic on my channel for anyone who wants to check it out. And ever since I started interviewing, people that I knew at G-Fest here on the channel, for the longest time I wanted to, bring Keith aboard and, give him the spotlight. Unfortunately, the last couple of years, I've been just kind of haven't had time for newer interviews, and eventually Matt and I started Kaiju versus Cancer, so we were using the podcast to promote that project of ours, but finally found the time to enough free time to get back into doing the interviews. And I just want to let people give Keith here the chance to let people know who he is and the kind of stuff that he has worked on. As I previously mentioned, he worked on Kadoja. And I guess to get things started right away, you mentioned you started this in 2011. Now, I am curious to know, was it you who originally came up with the idea for Kadoja and eventually came across the right people at the right time to make your vision a reality? Or was this whole thing one equally collaborative effort?
Okay, so yeah, I mean that's a great question, and I think I'll tell a long-winded story, and I think it has all the answers in it, but I'll try to be as succinct as possible. So for people who don't know, I'm also in a band. The band's name is Big Tim Jones. Yeah, we did a whole bunch of we had a bunch of releases through boutique funk labels around the turn of the decade, between 2006 and 2011 was our peak activity with a couple records coming out. So through record labels like Freestyle Records, Record Break-In, Funk Night Records, and so those are the three main labels that we put out stuff through. And at one point, so we kind of got a little bit of publicity and a little bit of notoriety by doing fake soundtracks. So the two records we did on Freestyle are called Bad Bad Jimmy Ruckus and Jimmy Ruckus and the Five Fingers of Death, the sequel. And they were faux soundtracks. So we made up fake stories, and we basically kind of did the whole, hey, look at this rare gem of a record we found. We're re-releasing it, et cetera, et cetera. And people really liked it. And then we did our best to kind of replicate, old sounds and what an old soundtrack would sound like. So at some point, we had the idea to do a faux Godzilla soundtrack and did all the music to it. And so this is a band thing. And we had this cool booming orchestration with Led Zeppelin drums and with kind of like funk bass lines and some guitar. And we presented it to the label. And again, I don't mind kind of going into the details. I thought it was going to be from a fake movie, a fake Godzilla movie called The Final Destruction of Tokyo, right? And which I still love that title, right? Yeah. And so we did that. I submitted to the record label, and through no fault of my own and random coincidence, that was, I believe, when the massive earthquake hit Japan about 6 or 7 years ago. Right. So something that was the day before a clever title became very bad taste.
Ooh, yeah. Oh,
right.
By the way, as of this recording, we are 1 day away from like the 8th anniversary of the 311 tsunami incident.
Yes. So there you go. I'm almost dating myself right there in terms of how long we've been doing this. But so after that, the record label got cold feet, right? Yeah. And they were just like, well, we don't want to do this. And of course, my counterpoint was, well, it's instrumental music. I can change the title. Yeah. But by that time, I think the ship had sailed. The label, just couldn't kind of unglue that from whatever, even though it was instrumental music. Right. So I got with the band, and I had messed around with writing. I've taken creative writing classes. I've written a terrible screenplay that I never want anybody to see ever. And I love comics. And I was like, well, what if I wrote a comic around this soundtrack? So the soundtrack came first, and then came the comic. Oh, and okay. At the time, I had. I mentioned that I released a record through Record Break-In, and I did that. And I'm part of an artist collective, a very loose, all over the globe artist collective that for a long time ago was called Hot Peas and Butter. The kind of leader of the collaboratives was this guy named Skeem Richards, who's amazing funk DJs all around the world and stuff. And so we collaborated on a record for Record Break-In that was, we were working on it at the time. And we had met this guy named Lance, obviously Lance, who then got on to work with Kadoja. So I had known Lance. I think Lance had done a little bit of an art thing for something we had done before. Oh, that's right. We did another record through Record Break-In before. So I knew Lance anyway. And I guess when I was somehow talking to Lance about it, he was like, that's a cool project. I think I want to be down with that. Right. I think that's how it came about. It's been a while. And then eventually Lance had known Rory by them doing some work together. So we all got connected. And then from then on, it was a very, very, very collaborative effort. Even to the point where I feel weird even saying that I'm like the sole creator, because that's not how it came about. It was extremely collaborative. I'm really more just making a point that, I'm the one still kind of still out there with Kadoja. Right. And while the other guys have, again, more than it's more than cool that they've moved on to other stuff, or at least Lance is kind of transitioning while still giving a ton of creative input into Kadoja. Okay. But anyway, so again, that was long-winded. Hopefully it wasn't too, hopefully people are still listening. And that's how Kadoja came about.
Oh, not at all, man. It is very fascinating because I don't know many artists out there who would like combine music do like such a ambitious multimedia project here, like having their character being represented through both the comic medium and music as well. And it's also very interesting that you mentioned you are part of a funk band, Big Pimp Jones. and you're going for like that. I'm assuming like this very 70s aesthetic with the funk vibe. And you mentioned you were trying to do a fictional soundtrack, originally doing a fictional soundtrack to a fictional Godzilla / kaiju film. By any chance, was the soundtrack itself ever so inspired by the 70s late Showa era Godzilla films?
Yes and no. Yes and no. You know, the Showa era Godzilla films were, and I know the ones you're speaking of, right? You're speaking of Hedorah and Megalon specifically, in terms of the ones that had the funky soundtracks, right? And so that was
stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And so that definitely was, I think what we were looking to do is fuse those things with the kind of music we did. Okay. So, you know, and by the way, that fake soundtrack I was talking about is the soundtrack to the first story arc called Terror Mountain Showdown. It's a, you know, I'm sure you can find it right now. You can download it, all that stuff. So I mean, that is the soundtrack. That was this faux Godzilla soundtrack way back in the day that we, you know, then made to the soundtrack of Kadoja Volume 1. But yeah, so no, it was meant to be a bridge, you know, like 80% classic Fukube stuff, and then another 20% kind of the funkier stuff without delving into the corny. And in fairness, we actually did write a corny song. But it never made the light of day. We wrote it and then did a little bit of thing, and we just thought, you know, we've got almost a dozen tracks that are a certain type of thing, and then that final track just didn't quite work. We had thought of releasing it on its own, but yeah, never did.
Okay, then I would have loved to have seen, like, was it something more along the lines of like "Save the Earth" or like the King Caesar song?
Oh yeah, totally.
Or
totally.
like the Jet Jaguar song.
Yeah, it was like, I you know what? I'll see if I can find it. I remember Ruckus did the bass line. So Ruckus is Chris Williams, the bassist in Big Pimp Jones, and it was just like donk 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 donk. Like it was just kind of corny, and yeah, it was definitely inspired by the bendy horn fanfare that you know, because it was meant to have kind of corny horns going on behind it. But yeah, now you've encouraged me to dig through my master discs and see if I still have that somewhere.
And so it seems like music has been, like, before Kadoja became a thing, it seemed like your biggest passion or hobby was like primarily music. Go. Okay. True. And how long have you been into music, or how long have you been a performer?
Well, I would go. There was kind of like a not ready for prime time period. I mean, I've been writing songs since I was probably 12, right? But the songs didn't get good until I was maybe 23 or 4. And so, you know, what Big Pimp Jones actually started as a live instrument rap band, right? Okay. So I was out in front doing the rhyming, and then there was a live funk band behind me. And then over time, because I ended up writing a lot of the guitar lines, the guitarist walked away from the band, and I just walked in. And I was kind of looking at pivot at the time. You know, you get to a certain age where you wonder if you're old enough to rhyme. And now, of course, I find that ridiculous. Like, I'll release a rhyme album whenever I want, you know, but
like your recent Mechagodzilla album, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yes, that's, I mean, yeah, very fresh, right? And so yeah, that's kind of how we got about it with the rhyming, and then over the instrumentation, and then it just kind of evolved from there.
Okay, then. And around what time did you join Big Pimp Jones?
We renamed our old band with another name into Big Pimp Jones in, I think it was about 2007, something like that. So sorry, yeah, I kind of lost the point there. So we'd been doing some rap stuff that was pretty decent in the 90s and 2000s. And then at some point we had all our instrumental tracks. Well, I was listening to our tracks one time, and I was like, you know what? If you take my rhymes off this stuff, it's a pretty good album. And that was what we first released that got people's attention. We called it Big Pimp's Kung Fu Studio, and renamed ourselves Big Pimp Jones, which is actually an ode to this old action figure from the 70s, Big Jim. And so there's an actually playset out there called Big Jim's Kung Fu Studio. And then you kind of combine that with Big Pimp Jones, which was meant to be an ode to the blaxploitation film Black Belt Jones, which is one of my favorite martial arts films. And there you have it. So yeah, probably around 2006, 2007, we renamed ourselves Big Pimp Jones, and along the way we gave ourselves some fake names as well. So there's a single out there. Yeah, there's a single out there by a group called Clarence Foster and the Internal Revenue Service. Yeah, that's us.
Okay. And for every song that you guys have done, you've always been like the lead rap vocalist?
Yeah. I mean, I haven't rhymed until recently. Mechagodzilla was the first thing I released since probably 2005. That had rhymes on it. We had gone instrumental for about 10 years there, even though I still did kind of rhyme stuff on the side because I just enjoy it. Okay, and now it's like that. All the vocals that like for the Mechagodzilla album, that's all you, right? Correct. All right, me. Excellent. And so you mentioned that you've done like primarily like rap and funk style music, and I do want to know what were some of the like biggest inspirations that led to you and your band's style of music, that like the biggest things that influenced you the most. Sure. So pre-Kadoja, the biggest influences were totally James Brown. I mean, James Brown is just, he created funk. Basically, right. You can mince it a couple different ways, but I think it's fair to say that James Brown created funk, and so James Brown was a big influence, and then of course Parliament Funkadelic was a pretty big influence, and then after that there was just a big family tree of those bands, and then the bands that that fell from them, right? That everywhere around the world from like 1968 to 1976, there were just all these bands in a garage somewhere making funky music, and that music has now seen the light of day. So yeah, those are pretty much it. I have tons of other musical influences these days, but back then it was all, in hip hop. I'm a huge Wu-Tang Clan fan. I'm also a huge let's see, who else? Public Enemy. I loved Public Enemy growing up. I'm dating myself. I'm old for all the people that are out there. Hey, they got the classics, man. I grew up to Public Enemy, people. That's how old I am. But yeah, so that kind of stuff. And now, obviously, and I've always been, kind of to take it full circle. I've always loved metal, and as we go forward, there's going to be much more metal. In fact, on a couple of the Kadoja soundtracks, there are some experiments with metal. Oh, okay. And also, for those of you, of the people out there that listen to Kaiju Cast, which I would imagine there's probably a pretty decent cross-section, Kyle Yount's podcast. Oh, yeah. The opening theme is Big Pimp Jones as well. And that's a metal song, right? And oh, yeah, totally. So anyway. And anyone who follows my live stream knows that the intro for my monthly live stream series is made by Big Pimp Jones as well. I believe it was called, the track was Slipping and Sliding. Oh, hell yeah, man. That's great. Yeah, so are you the reason that I'm getting all these YouTube views? Yeah. Probably, man. It's like anytime anyone would tell me, hey, where'd you get that funky track? It's like Big Pimp Jones. It's like, what's Big Pimp Jones? Well, let me tell you. Well, here's the tricky thing. Like, that is far and away our most watched video. And we don't have, I don't know, people listen to our stuff and that makes me happy. But I mean, the number of views we have on that is so much more than all the other ones. So there you go, man. It must be you. Ah, yeah. Either that or you must have known it was like the most popular one, so you send me that by default. Probably. It's the one that people seem to like the most. So hey, absolutely, it's all good. Yeah. It definitely pays. Yeah. It definitely pays off when you know a guy who's damn good at his job. And you mentioned before, like, looking at the album covers, when you mentioned, like, Bad Bad Jimmy Ruckus or Jimmy Ruckus and the Five Fingers of Death, it looks like you're really going for, like, that blaxploitation vibe, which I believe you mentioned before. And yes.
how did that play into, like, was that sort of like a film genre of like kung fu films and blaxploitation films? Was that stuff that you personally grew up with, or was that something you found and later adopted later in life?
Later. I definitely didn't grow up with it. I wasn't that savvy, like, and I, even for a lot of people, in the kaiju genre, people are so good at finding all this stuff. Like for me, when I was young, it's like I liked comics and I liked Kiss and I liked Star Wars, right? And that was it. So that informed so much of what I did, of just my spare time, probably until I got to college. So, I mean, blaxploitation was something I found out after college in terms of really getting into it. And Godzilla, I was even later really, really embracing Godzilla. So, yeah, I mean, you can kind of follow as I kind of absorb and fall in love with all these wonderful genre things, you can almost see the creative output follow. Right. So my creative output has been a nice mirror image of the space I've been at the time in terms of the thing that I'm just in love with.
Okay. Have you ever wondered what would happen if the kaiju and blaxploitation genre were to ever mix? Could you imagine what that would be like?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Something tells me the intersection is somewhere around the movie Super Inframan, which is my favorite movie.
Probably, yeah.
Or like, one of my top 3 movies of all time. I always rep that movie in terms of how much I love it.
I can just imagine some like Dolomite like style character just turning into a superhero to fight off giant monsters.
Hell yeah. I mean, have we not just described, Japanese TV, like what, freaking Kamen Rider and
totally.
Kikaida and all those things.
Yeah, Sentai, totally, all that stuff. Yeah. No, let's put a black guy in the middle of things, and there you go.
Yeah. So no, and actually, it's kind of crazy. I'm surprised that that's never happened. Now I'm going to have to go back through this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for like genre bending, genre blending. Just taking like random formulas, smash them together, see how it mix. Yeah.
Well, wait a minute. We've talked far too long without you getting to talk about some Draco Azul stuff. So I want to talk to you about that. Like you said, you're making your second issue, right? So congratulations on the first issue, which I think is going to the printer soon, correct?
Yeah. Currently, the book is pretty much finished. I'm just waiting on my good friend James Biggie. I'm pretty sure you're familiar with him, right? Oh boy. Okay, I'm here.
There you are.
Okay, so let's see. It looks like we're still recording.
Perfect. Well, then I'll resume my question and you can edit later.
Yes,
which
totally.
is
we'll fix it in post. Go ahead.
I wanted to talk to you about Draco Azul, man. I wanted to congratulate you, I guess, on being done with your first comic. I think it's going to print soon, correct?
Yeah, we're almost there. We're so close to the printing stage, printing/digital distribution stage. Currently the whole entire book has been, it's been colored, it's been lettered. All I'm waiting for now is my good friend James Biggie, who, for those who don't know, is one of the co-creator of the indie giant robot comic, Robot God Akamatsu. He's also a cover artist for IDW for stuff like 2000 AD, Transformers. He did Godzilla, a variant for Godzilla Rage Against Time #1, and he's doing a cover for my comic, and he's also going to be doing the interiors for the front cover and back cover as well. So just waiting on those. He said he'd be free this month to finish up those last pages. Once those are done, and my letterer can finish putting the whole thing together and getting it formatted, then by then we'll have the comic available. I want to say hopefully next month or the month after, but I do definitely am very confident that we'll be ready to have the comic available at this year's G-Fest in the Artist Alley.
Excellent, man. Well, again, congratulations on that. And you said you're working on issue 2.
Yes.
So I wanted to know what how are you enjoying the comic creating world, right?
Yeah, it's definitely been a very interesting experience that, I'm constantly learning new things as I go about it, because I would say Draco Zul was perhaps my first foray into how do you call it, into like the creative process. It's like the first thing I've ever really committed to making something that I plan on selling, or like, having it out there in the public, like a first real creative project. And I've learned a lot from Chris Martinez. I've learned a lot from my editor, Jonathan Claude, who worked on the World War I anthology comic To End All Wars, and he worked with Chris Martinez on the Fire Beast Dorugan comic series.
Yes.
Let's see. I had an amazing time collaborating with Tyler Souls, who is wrapping up the second issue of Durantis the Lost Serpent very soon. And I've just taken a lot of inspiration from, I think I mentioned this to you in private, Keith, that one of the biggest inspirations were the Artist Alley community, and seeing them and their output of original kaiju inspired creations. And so it's like, as soon as I saw you guys doing your thing, it's like, oh, that's cool. If they can do it, why can't I? And people,
exactly.
I shared my ideas with some of you guys, and you guys were like, "Oh, wow, this is really good. I want to see this, become a thing." And that gave me the confidence to say, "Yeah, it can become a thing."
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, so the truth is that you walked up to us one day where we were just popping bottles, right? And we were just lighting cigars with $100 bills and just rolling in the millions of dollars that we make from creating independent giant monster comics. And you're like, man, I need a corner on that street, I want
to be just like them.
That's right.
By golly,
I want to make my first million.
That is one of the biggest lessons that Chris Martinez told me right away. It's like, there's no money. There's no in all seriousness, there's no money in indie comics. If you're going to go into indie comics, you have to do it for the passion.
Totally.
Yeah, it's like,
and I mean, it comes from a drive to just have your story out there, right? That's it.
Right.
You just, you want to tell stories, and it's a wonderful feeling when you're out there, selling your book and someone's interested in it. It's a wonderful feeling when somebody tells you that they like your book. It's a less wonderful feeling when people tell you they don't, but you roll with it after a while.
Yeah.
Hey, dude, you're going. For the thing that I always think of is, for every single piece of pop culture ever made, there are people who hate it, right?
True,
and
very true.
It's just a matter of where the people who you need more people to love it than hate it, and then after that, the rest is gravy.
Right, totally, yeah. No, everyone has different opinions. I certainly have opinions that are different from other people when it comes to certain pieces of media, and not everyone's going to think the same. And whatever criticism you receive, the best thing you can do is learn from it and see how you can use if the criticism is constructive enough, then you can use that to better yourself as an artist, as a creator.
Absolutely.
I mean, I can tell you, when we're done recording, I can tell you stories of certain people's reactions to my criticisms on their work.
Yeah, you're on the other side, right? You're now coming at it from both sides.
Yeah. I mean, I came at this as a critic, and people can see from the other side. People can see me as an artist now, and they're free, and they're free to criticize me as much. Maybe it's time people can have their revenge and say, "Well, exactly. I think you suck as a storyteller. You can't write for shit."
I've been waiting 6 years to tell you suck. I've been waiting for you to give me that opportunity, right?
Yeah, and
I mean, again, it's all good. For Kadoja, the favorable response has been so much greater than whatever unfavorable things. And again, you're going to have those, right?
Yeah.
But whenever you get it, you just ask, does this have merit? and then if it does, is there something I should do about it?
Right.
And then you go from there.
That's all I can hope for. And
the
thing I want to, since you mentioned the positive reception towards Kadoja, so we mentioned like the origins of Kadoja. I did want to mention what has been like some of the most memorable experiences you've had with fans of your work.
That's a really good question. I mean, the memorable experiences are almost always the in-person experiences, right? And obviously, there are people out there who read and like Kadoja who I've never met. But if you don't meet somebody, then it's tough to get an experience. You know what I mean? Like obviously, people that I'm omitting. But yeah, for me, the most memorable experiences are the ones that are in person. I mean, I do at least 8 shows a year, a number of shows between 8 and 12 in general. And, I suppose...
By shows, you mean like conventions or like...
Actual... Sorry, conventions. But I think in general, the memorable stuff is just when people come up and they want to talk about giant monsters. You know what I mean? And now Kadoja, I like to think, is more than a giant monster book. So maybe they want to come up and talk Lovecraft, or they want to come up and talk indie comics. They want to talk about making a comic. But it's all that stuff. It's tough for me to pinpoint any one thing, Andres. But then again, I mean, in a way, like this podcast is a result of the memorable experiences, right?
Very true. Yeah. I mean, I'm nothing more than a mere fan as well.
But like, but in seriousness, it's like, that's what makes G-Fest cool, and that's why missing it this year is going to be, kind of bittersweet, right? Because the personal connections you make at spots like that are above and beyond a lot of the connections that you're going to make at a standard show. But that said, there's people that, I see at every time I'm in town. I have Emerald City Comic Con in a week. And there's people that are up there in Seattle, and they get to stop by, and we get to catch up a little bit, talk about whatever we want to talk about. It branches into everything. It goes past comics quickly, and before you know it, you're talking about music, or you're talking about all this other stuff. And now you're friends on Facebook, so you can kind of get caught up, and you meet people and you make friends. That's the best part of this.
Oh, totally, yeah. And as you have been, a part of the, G-Fest and other conventions, you've gone, especially in the case of G-Fest, I've seen you being like a big part of the kaiju community, collaborating with Kyle on Kaiju Cast and having a few panels of your own in the at G-Fest. It's like, what has those experiences been like, being able to collaborate with other people within this genre that you love so much?
It's been a blast, man. I mean, any time I'm on an episode of Kaiju Cast, it's always fun. Kind of like with you, like this whole thing. I mean, I met Kyle because of Kadoja. So, but yeah, it's been great to collaborate with him on. I think we did a sketchbook, kind of a sketch comic a couple years ago at G-Fest, and then followed that up with a conversation and a kind of an exclusive, I suppose CD only podcast, which was a lot of fun.
Oh, okay.
I'm trying to think, like that was really cool.
Were you part of that?
Obviously,
were you a part of that one panel where like Kyle was reading out Marvel's Godzilla?
Hell yeah, man! Of course, that was a great time. Yeah, we did that 3 years in a row. And the reason we didn't do it any more than that is because there are no more comics to read. Like in year one, so we did 3 years. Year one we did, and Stephen Schilling, who's fantastic and also a real staple at G-Fest. He read, I think, 2 out of the 3 years. We had David Dopko reading 1 of the 3 years, and then Kyle and I were holding it down. But year one we did Godzilla 23 and 24 from the Marvel run, which is the Avengers storyline.
Oh yeah.
And then I think year 2 we ended up doing, God, I can't even remember. I think we did a couple more of the Marvel issues, or maybe a Marvel issue and a Dark Horse issue. And then I think in year 3 we did another Marvel issue, and then we did Godzilla versus Barkley, which
yes. Yeah,
well, I can thank like a person in this audience mockingly said we should do that. And I think I remember telling him at the time, like, you know what? I think we are going to do that because I'm a huge NBA fan. So it was, I don't know, Godzilla vs. Barkley is like awful, but it's also kind of magical. Like it's such a great symptom of like a crappy cash in on someone's celebrity.
Right,
you know what I mean?
Like, it was the Space Jam of the Godzilla franchise. Totally.
You know, and the whole thing grew from a clever Nike commercial.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what made it
just
so
like Space Jam.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what's really sad is that you and I are going to be asked by a bunch of people in the audience what Space Jam is.
Well, it's a movie, guys. Go watch Space Jam. Yeah. It's great.
It's only the greatest animated masterpiece of all time.
If I can also mention, it has a really good soundtrack.
Yes.
The soundtrack to that. Dude, it's got, I mean, off memory, it's got, I think Seals Fly Like an Eagle is from that film, right?
Right.
And then you've got
R. Kelly?
What's the is I Believe I Can Fly from that? Oh my God, you're right.
I think so. Yeah. I think that was him. Before all the controversy with him.
Well, yeah. But I mean, you know, just viewing it objectively as a song, just a mega smash of a song.
Dude,
and then there's a Quad City DJ song on there. Space Jam. I think it's called Space Jam.
Come on and slam and welcome to the jam.
It's excellent. And then the Monstars theme is on there, if I remember right.
Yes.
Like, it's excellent. It's got Cypress Hill and Method Man on there. So yeah, man. No, I'll ride for the Space Jam soundtrack. It's really good.
By the way, speaking of sorry to go on a tangent again, but are you aware that the official Space Jam website is still active?
Is it really?
Yes. In fact, here on this podcast, I'm going to look it up right now so I can send it to you.
I think isn't LeBron James remaking it? I'm pretty sure that.
I think there's been like rumors for like the last 10 or so years, but I think recently it was confirmed. I want to say it was confirmed. So I got the link. I'm looking at it in all its like pre-2000, pre-21st century glory.
That sounds amazing.
Let's see. And in fact, you can download through this website, you can download the trailer, and it's like super pixelated.
No, that's awesome.
There you go. I just sent it to you on Facebook.
Oh, good. I
want to have your live reaction. I want to have your live reaction to this.
Okay, I was going rogue. Hold on. Let me just click on your link here. Oh my. That is fantastic. Wow, this really is. Yeah, this really is like this wonderful kind of time warp. Well, I'm going to click on the icon that says Planet B-Ball. Oh my God. Yeah. Okay, so I highly recommend everybody. It's spacejam.com. You need to go there.
Yes, you should. Come on.
It's excellent. It's excellent.
It's time to slam.
Yeah.
Welcome to the jam.
Well, man, have we just talked for 5 minutes about Space Jam? That's been amazing.
I believe so, man. Only here on the Shuwatch podcast.
That's right. That's right. Well, tangents.
Most people come into a Kaiju Webs podcast expecting Kaiju. You thought wrong, my friend.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, and maybe again, that's because we know. Should we talk more about Kaiju? I'm not even sure what we should talk about.
Let's see. So, I guess we can go into transition into like the comic itself of Kadoja, and I did want to know what were the events that led to Kadoja's final design. You know, like the humanoid build, the Hulk-like mentality, the large chin. You know, where did the rocky skin texture, the biomechanical nature of it. Where did all of those ideas come from that eventually culminated into the final creation? Okay,
no, that's good stuff. I'll do my best to remember where they came from because it's been a while. I mean, so the original design of Kadoja was my instructions to Lance and Rory were it needs to look as unlike Godzilla as possible. Right. Okay. Yeah. I just wanted it to be the most un-Godzilla thing going.
Oh yeah, totally. And, I mean, no offense to a lot of people out there, but there are a lot of Godzilla clones out there. By that I mean there's a lot of people who make who do their take on the dinosaurian, theropod, reptilian, bipedal monster out there.
Yes, exactly. And again, I just didn't vision Kadoja like that. So it started by making it humanoid, and that just felt like, that's as un-Godzilla as you can get. And then really that's the first thing that jumps in my head. And the second thing that jumps in my head is actually it doesn't really show up in the design, but is Shogun Warriors. It was the
fist, right?
Yeah. So there you go. You nailed it. That the firing fist thing. Like I had a fair amount of Shogun Warriors, the OGs, when I was a kid. Again, nice. I'm old, everyone. So yeah, man, I had at least 4, I think, and one of them was the old school Godzilla. Yeah, but no, that was wonderful to have those things. So yeah, those obviously kind of captured my imagination, and so that kind of became that. And then after that, everything came from a spot of practicality, right? So you've got this thing that's not like Godzilla, and you've got a Shogun Warrior thing. And then you ask yourself, I mean, the way that I kind of drove it through was, if the military is designing this, and, in my world, the military is designing it, what would they do? Right. Okay. And it would be like, well, you'd probably create some kind of rock hard skin that would kind of, nullify physical attacks. Right. And then so that's kind of where that came from. And then I think at some point, by starting at humanoid, the space that we were in a lot there was Hulk and Clayface. I remember. Yeah, I remember. I think I still have this email somewhere, but Lance was kind of going back and forth with me on some design stuff, and he asked me a question, and I said, kind of like Clayface, and then he wrote an email back like, "Thank you. The Clayface thing was clutch," right? So that, again, kind of in that space of like a Hulk, of kind of like a Clayface. I mean, again, everything is like something,
right,
like
totally.
I'm hoping that when people look at Kadoja, they see the influence, but obviously, you just nod your head and you're like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. But it's not that much like any of those things, right? It's a little bit of a lot of them. Yeah. And then the chin, the neck was something, I think that came about because it just felt like if you were going to build this thing that tall, that huge, right, 200 feet, then you couldn't have a point of structural weakness with a thin neck like a humanoid neck. You would need the neck to be bigger to support the head as it got kind of smaller, right? So yeah, that was the design that I wanted it to be, and we wanted it to be, again, not structurally funky. If you have this thing that's the size of a building, you wanted it to kind of be pyramid in some aspects, and by that, a nice thick neck, and then a smaller head kind of coming out of it.
Now, was the chin itself inspired by Robert Zadar?
Yeah, we hear a lot about the chin, but no, the chin just
was that just like an art style sort of thing?
It was, I think Rory did that. I think Rory is the chin, right?
Okay.
And I think one day he just did chin. Yeah, I don't know. Now I'm gonna have to go back through. I keep pretty good archives, so I may interrupt myself in a couple minutes as I go back and look through these initial Kadoja sketches.
Okay, then. Yeah, and I would say that you've certainly succeeded in making something that does stand out from the rest of the crowd in terms of original characters.
Well, thank you.
I did want to know, you mentioned that this was like a biomechanical weapon, and having read, the first 2 volumes of your comic, it looks like Kadoja's constantly pulling out new tricks and weapons out of his the inner workings of his body. Which makes me wonder, do you guys have like an actual schematic of Kadoja's inner workings inside, or are you keeping it like as vague as possible as an excuse to make new weaponry or new weapons and attacks for him?
Yeah, I actually don't have a schematic inside of that, although that's something that would be kind of fun to do. Okay. But yeah, I mean, to your point, I think you kind of answered it at the second part, right? That the, I mean, it kind of goes back to what I think is the closest tie to kaiju stuff, right? Which is this mystical feel, right? True. That while like I just feel like I could spend a lot of time creating a schematic, but I enjoy the magical nature of some of the attacks, just like in Godzilla films, you have this magical nature of the attack. Like how did Godzilla pull that out of his ass?
Right.
Like that kind of thing, right? And while I don't want it to be, quite like that, I do enjoy the, how did it do that? There's something else going on here other than science angle, which is an overall theme of Kadoja anyway. Right. But and hopefully I'll have time to unpack that in full as we go through the story a little bit more.
And I guess going into that, so like the main, without trying to spoil too much, the main sort of antagonistic force within your story is this sort of like ethereal, sort of like Lovecraftian horrors, ancient horror that is slightly seeping through like into the real world from after being dormant for for hundreds, if not thousands of years.
Yes.
What was the inspiration behind that, or what led you, or whoever else you were collaborating with, to come up with that as your main antagonist?
Yeah. Well, I'm a huge Lovecraft fan.
Okay.
And for me, the rumors of the infamous Godzilla versus Cthulhu movie aside from way back in the day, right? I've always felt that the Godzilla and Elder Gods angle, at the time I wrote Kadoja anyway, was underconnected, underexploited, right? In that you'd go to all these Godzilla films and, like a monster comes up out of the earth and everybody goes like, hey, look, it's a monster. I'm going to name him Baragon. Like that kind of thing. And it's like, dude, if a monster came up out of the earth right now, I'd be like, holy shit. Like I need to run, right?
The reaction that one senator makes at the very end of issue 1, that's like the most real you can possibly get. You're like,
exactly.
Fuck
Well,
this.
thank you. Yeah.
I'm out.
Exactly. So yeah, I mean, that's the thing where it's this is horrifying, right? These things are horrifying.
Yeah.
And some other people have done it well too, but that's the angle that I really wanted to connect this to a Lovecraftian thing. And I will say that further along this story goes, the heavier the doses of cosmic horror are getting, right? So I've written all of the third arc, and I'm getting, I think I have penciled pages back for almost the first 2 of this one's going to be a 4-issue arc, but the first 2 I'm almost done with, and then they're going to the inker over time. But yeah, when you look at the stuff that's written here, like the cosmic horror connections are even stronger, and they're going to be stronger for the 4th arc as well.
Okay, then. And what, in terms of like the human cast, you've said this, you've kind of made this out to be like, part like horror and kaiju action thriller, part like military political thriller or drama. What made you approach this from like the military's perspective with your human cast?
Yeah, that's a good question. To be truthful, I did not want to have it be a military thing because, well, with the military thing, I wanted to avoid cliche, and I feel like with any giant monster story, you have the military there, and so I actually spent a good amount of time trying to figure out a way to tell the story without the military. But then when it came down to it, it was more of a decision of, if you have that, then you have Cloverfield, right? And while I think Cloverfield had some redeeming things, I think somebody told me this at one point, and I just went with it. Somebody called it Ally McBeal, but with giant monsters, right? And it's like, it's just a bunch of, so again, that's another dated reference, but it was basically a TV show about kind of a bunch of whiny 20-somethings at the time. And like whining about their personal problems and stuff like that. And that's kind of how Cloverfield plays out, right? That it's a bit indulgent and whiny for all the characters, to the point where you really don't root for any of them to live. And if you love Cloverfield, well, then we can talk about that over a beer as well. But yeah, so I mean, I think Cloverfield's okay. I unfortunately can't watch it because of the motion sickness thing. But
Okay.
but yeah, so I wanted to avoid the military thing if I could. But then after just banging my head against the wall for a while, I realized that I still needed to tell it from a military point of view.
Yeah.
And that's why I hopefully put a couple of twists in there that at least take a cliche and turn it a little on its side, right? Like there's no president. And I feel like the president was always a staple in a lot of this stuff. I wanted it to kind of be the people that are dealing with it, and then, creating this new division of the military called Special Weapons Division, and then having that military division fronted by a woman. So that's the kind of, again, those are the places where I kind of thought out loud, if I'm going to adhere to this convention, I might as well turn a couple things about the convention on their side.
Okay, so you approach it from the military's perspective as a necessity for the story to progress naturally. Yes. Okay, then. And I do want to say, I really enjoy the cast of characters you have in your comic, and I would say, the way you handled, the way you write military characters, I'm not sure if I mentioned this in my actual review, but I do want to have it stated here that your approach to writing military characters was executed so much better than how they executed characters in the 2014 film with Ford Brody's character.
Well, thank you. That's that's nice to hear, and I will say that I've had the response from people that are in the military has been 90% favorable.
Oh,
right.
Wow.
And that's great to hear, right? Because I have had a couple people say, "You've never been in the military, huh?" And then we'll proceed to have a conversation about it. But most people who are in the military have said, "Dude, you get it." It's just like a lot of other places, in terms of this person disobeying that person or whatever. You know what I mean? It has a lot of the same traits that business workplaces have, et cetera, right?
Okay. That did remind me of, did you had to do any research involving the military or anything else for your comic?
I did some, but my general way around it is I did a decent amount of research and felt good about it, but it's its own division of the military, and it's my fictional world, so therefore I'm right.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, it's what are they? It's the writer is they can determine what anything anything goes in the writer's world.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's your world. You should have fun with it, right? And I mean, I think I want to ask you this.
Okay.
Have you ever been sidetracked by research?
Let's see. A little bit. Because Draco Azul comes from a, pseudo Maya Mesoamerican background, I did do a fair bit of research in the past, and I've actually been doing more research now in preparation for a potential crossover in the future. That involve bringing Mesoamerican mythologies into play. And so I have gotten a bit lost in, trying to learn more and more about the history of Mesoamerican cultures, like the Aztecs, the Maya, the Inca. And it's also very important for me as a Mexican American, because this is sort of I'm also, by researching stuff for my comic, I'm also kind of researching a bit more into my own cultural heritage that has since been lost to time, to history.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
So it's it's as equally as intriguing for me on a personal level as it is for my work. Sure. And I mean, in a way, you've kind of answered it in a way that a lot of people answer it, which is, research is addictive, and you can waste your days going with research, right? And I mean, I suppose if I was like Tom Clancy, I'd probably need to be airtight with my research, but since the principal of my story is a 200-foot tall bio droid. Yeah.
I feel like people do understand that there's a little bit of pseudo to everything in there, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, the bottom line is I did research and then applied it. But I think there's a tipping point where research, you know, like you can try to be so accurate with your research, but then once you get to that point, you realize that you're making your fictional world far too much like the real world, and that's not the point. You
Right.
know what I mean? Like this isn't,
especially if you aim to make escapist fantasy.
totally, and that exactly. Like if I was looking to, you know, write a love story set in 17th century Scotland, I'd better know what the hell's going on in 17th century Scotland.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But you know, once you introduce the whole alternate reality stuff, then I think people pick it up.
Right. And let's see. I assume because it's escapist, did you ever like consider putting any sort of like subtle means of political commentary in your comic, or is it just meant for the most part just like pure escapist fantasy?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think I put commentary in there, but it's not political.
More like social, right?
Yeah, I mean more
personal,
more the human condition.
Yeah,
more how people are. You know, like I suppose for some reason the line that jumps to my head is the one that's at the end of the first arc, where just to set this up for people that haven't read it, the principal, the protagonist, General Cruz, is on an airplane, and she's about to get airdropped into the field where she's gonna try to shut down Kadoja.
Right.
And her estranged lover is on the plane with her, and he thinks he's going into the field with her, but she says, "No, you're going back home because you have our daughter to take care of in case something happens to me." And he asks her the question, are you more afraid of being a parent than you are of a giant monster? You know, and so that's the place that I'm gonna, you know, like I'm trying to pick my spots, but it's little places like that where I'm trying to put something in there. So yeah, I mean, there's commentary there, but it's just meant to be the kind of commentary that you'll think about because hopefully you can relate to something. Hopefully you can relate to the relationship between two characters, whoever those two characters are. Right? There's obviously the parents of a child who are now separated. There's the Lovecraft side of it where you have a person who's risen to power who has somehow done his sage advisor wrong, and they're estranged as well, right? So there's a bunch of relationships there, and again, hopefully there's something that people can relate to. So anyway, that's long-winded, but yeah, that's the spots where my commentary is. I'll leave political commentary to people that are good at it.
Right. And I do feel like, you know, the personal, social commentary, you know, the peering into the human mind sort of deal, I feel was excellently done. And, you know, I really enjoy Jennifer Cruz, like every time I see her in the comics. And I would say, like, you've certainly succeeded at that. And it's sort of like a similar thing that I'm trying to do with Draco Azul in terms of like responsibility and how one man can handle so much of you know, trying to hold the entire world on his shoulders, and I just only hope I can, you know, succeed at that as much as as well as you did.
Well, thank you. It's very nice of you. But after reading the first issue, I can say you're off to a very good start, man. It was enjoyable.
Means a lot. And the last thing I want to mention when it comes to like the inner workings of the comic itself is the artwork, because like I mentioned in my review that you and Rory's approach to the artwork is very unique and very, I would say, like very not non-standard. What's a word I would use?
Unorthodox?
Yeah, exactly. That's the perfect word I would use. A very unorthodox method of doing art, and I'm fairly certain this was done for budgetary reasons. Am I correct? Like taking like a budgetary limitation and turning it into an advantage?
Yes. Well, I think that it's kind of like a yes and no. I mean, the whole reason for black and white was budgetary.
Okay.
Right. Which for all you aspiring comic creators out there, it is way less expensive to print a comic in black and white than in color.
Oh yeah, I'll let you know. Like I paid $1,000 just to get my comic colored.
Yeah, and wait till you get it printed, right? Because the printing cost is, if I remember right, it's like double, maybe a little bit more for it to be in color. Mm-hmm. And so it started as a budgetary reason, but I suppose to your point, Rory gave me prices for black and white and color, and I'm like, yeah, black and white it is, right? And but to your point, and I'm really giving Rory all the credit on this, is that once it was black and white, Rory figured out a way, and with he worked with Lance too. Again, it was really collaborative in terms of going back and forth, and us just like it was very collaborative in that they could give me advice on writing, and they gave me plenty of pointers that ended up making the story better. And I could give them advice on art, and hopefully some of the pointers I gave made the art better, right? So it was a great thing that we were doing as we were kind of forming the backbone and structure of this story. But yeah, what Rory did was Rory just I like to say he kind of Sam Keithed it up, right? Like it's really kind of funky and gritty and dirty, and I believe
erratic. I would say.
Yeah, I remember he sent me a note early on, and I think I may even have this somewhere, that once we decided to go grayscale, he went to the art store and bought, I believe it was a 40-pack of gray tones, right?
Those are like the markers, right?
Yeah, he bought a 40-pack of gray markers, and I remember his whatever the number was, he just said like, I got 40 shades of gray with an exclamation point, like it anyway. So that was fun, and I think to your point, Andres, like it was very conscious because if you look at the back covers in the first series, you can see that Rory can do clean art, so. This was by choice, and it's actually funny to me that when we submitted the book as an independent to Diamond, they came back and said the art isn't good enough, the art isn't clean enough for us to list it in previews. But
they're like, you don't get it, man.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, we took that punch and then kept trooping on, and it was in previews before long. So stick to your guns.
Yeah, and okay, so this was like a conscious decision to make it look as very like sketchy and almost like unfinished sort of thing.
Yes.
Okay, and that was mostly the idea of like Rory and the other individual.
Lance.
Right.
Well, and that was for the first arc. You know what?
Right.
Like if you open up the first book of the second arc, you're like, is this a new artist?
Oh yeah, it's much cleaner.
Yeah, and what you can see that that's Rory evolving into his animation style, right? And so the thing I really liked about Kadoja Volume 1 is that it's just raw and gritty, and again, just kind of a Sam Keith, or people have compared it to the super early Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles books, which I can also get down with. But then you look at issue 2, it's Kadoja meets Batman the Animated Series, and that's what. In
fact, it kind of reminds me of that. Have you seen that animated Disney short, Paperman? It's the one that like it looks 2D, but it's animated in 3D.
People have told me about that, and there was somebody else told me it reminds them, or no, wait, it's the covers. Sorry, the covers remind them of this video game, but I can't remember what it's called. But yes, I have heard that before. Okay, then yeah, it has like a rather like a Disney look to it, not like not like super big eye, Disney Princess Disney. I mean like like a action animated series, sort of like 90s era, like Gargoyles or Batman the Animated Series sort of look to it. And, which is very much Rory's aesthetic. And then to take that a little bit. Sorry, were you going to say something? Go ahead.
One of the things I've had on my mind ever since I first laid eyes on the artwork of the first comic is, why do the characters lack any pupils?
Oh yeah, that was just a stylistic choice by Rory. That's all. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that thing
They
always kind of
have
like
pupils by the time you get to the second arc. Yeah.
True, yeah. And I'm very glad that he added pupils for, as much as I like the art in the first arc, I really like the pupils look for the second arc, just because I just think it adds a whole new dimension of personality and character to his already expressive characters.
Yeah, and now we've got a new artistic team. So
yeah.
for the people that read the second arc, you'll notice, hopefully you'll notice that when you get to the end of the trade paperback, you'll see that the inking gets a little different.
Oh yeah,
and that's because we got a new guy who's great. His name's Jeremiah Lambert, who we got him to ink Rory's pencils, so that because Rory ended up kind of stepping away, and we had Jeremiah come in and do that. And the thing I really like about it is it in my opinion, it ended up kind of bridging the volume 2 art style with the volume 1 art style. So it has a lot cleaner lines, I think, but it's got a little bit more of a dirty, raw, gritty, tons of gray tones in it. And anyway, so Jeremiah is the inker. We have a new penciler on board for Kadoja Volume 3, and then Jeremiah is going to be doing all the finishing inking on it. So there will be a little continuity there. Again, I think I have about 3 pages inked and far more penciled right now, but the early pages look really good.
And I did want to say, like, when you transition from one artist to the other at the very end, the sort of transitionary period you use with the drone, I thought was very genius.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it's almost like a very touching send-off to Rory Smith's work as his style fades away and the new style gets introduced. That's
an excellent pickup by you. Very, very nice.
It's almost like transitioning between like Doctors and Doctor Who.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I'll say this too. You've actually served as a nice transition for. So I don't know when this is going to air, but we're recording this a week before Emerald City Comic Con in March 2019, and there is a new comic that's going to come out. And actually, I gave you the PDF on it.
Yes, you did.
It's called Kadoja Declassified.
Yeah.
And what it is it's about 14 to 16 pages of Rory pencils that we had kind of initially slated for volume 2, but couldn't get around to finishing it. And so what we decided to do was, I mean, I will say I'm a sucker for penciled pages. So it's intended to be an ash can style, right? But I mean, a high quality ash can. So it's penciled pages with kind of some ink lines out, outlining it, and then full on, normal story. And I went back and forth on what to do with it because I really liked these pages. And more importantly, I liked the stories that they were setting up for volume 3. And anyway, so yeah, we're releasing that as an ash can. I ended up adding some prose in the form of a journal from one of the professors who shows up in volume 2 and ends up leading into volume 3. Okay. And actually, just before we got online here, I'm doing some last minute editing on. It's going to be a book comes alive as you read thing. It's going to have it's going to have an audio accompaniment to it, so you can read it, but it's also going to come with a CD, and you pop that in, and you follow along, man. It's a storybook like the old records.
Nice, yeah. I did want to bring that up, where it's like sort of like somewhat like a pseudo motion comic sort of thing going on. How did that come about?
Which one? The one for the declassified?
For issue 1 of Kadoja.
For the first issue, or for the one I sent you?
Not for the one that you sent me. You mentioned. I think you may have. I saw at one point you were working on a project to make sort of like a motion comic with Kadoja issue number 1.
Oh, you mean the thing I showed you at the bar, right? Rory's little animation.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, that's the only animation that was ever done. That would make me so happy. I've said this to people before. If Kadoja is destined for another medium, I believe that medium is animation. I just feel you can tell the story you need to in Kadoja with animation. Yeah. And I haven't given up that dream, but yeah, it's a dream. It's a dream, and I'm happy to have that Kadoja animation, and if anybody comes up to me at a convention, I have it saved on my phone because it's fun to look at. But yeah, no, nothing's really happened more to that.
Or like any sort of motion comic, nothing like that.
Oh no, we're just going to keep this in the static world for now. But now I'm going to look through my phone and make sure I still have it. I think it's buried in one of my note programs.
I know what that's like. Yeah, you get so much stuff that you tend to lose your favorite stuff in your phone.
Yeah. No, there it is right there. It's great.
And if you like penciled work, I can show you like the pencils from Draco Azul #1 after this.
Yeah, totally.
And so when you were making the art over time, as the Kadoja project went along, you've had like collaborations with certain people, with other artists, and certain crossovers with other people, like the recent G-Fest one, where it was like Kadoja versus Atomic Rex and G-Fantas. What were these sort of collaborations like, be it story or art-wise?
Well, I mean, it's fun. I will say that my part of the collaboration was very limited. When it comes to Matt Denion's, I don't pronounce last names well, but Matt wrote a very cool story involving Kadoja for GFan, and his piece was cool. It was like kind of the it was like post-apocalyptic. Meeting G-Fantas. No, wait, was it Atomic Rex? God, I'm an idiot. Do me a favor and edit that out, okay?
That's okay. No, it's both of them.
Okay, good. Okay.
Yeah.
So do me a favor and edit that out, right? Okay. And then pick it up from here, okay? So
sure, I will. Wink. No, yeah, exactly. I will, seriously.
No, so yeah, it's no, I mean, look, I remembered them both, but it's hazy. But but yeah, so it's Kadoja, G-Fantas, and Atomic Rex in the future, and I dug it, right? But to your point on this, it was like people just asked me to do stuff, and then I'm like, sure, like if anything, it's fun to just have someone else kind of do a lot of the writing for it, and I gave a few notes, and then after that it was great, and I got to sit back and then read a killer story. It was nice.
Recently, it was last year when after Matt Denny and I started Kaiju versus Cancer, we asked you if you wanted Kadoja to be involved. You gave the okay, and we eventually put Kadoja in that big giant group shot for the second t-shirt that we sold, which was done by Tyler Souls.
Yes, which is an amazing piece. And again, that's a great example, right? Like, I mean, you guys are nice enough to like come to me for something and then it turns into something cool. Like I just sit around and do little, right? But it's great. I mean, but the overall thing is it's cool. It's cool to have people want to kind of incorporate your thing, Totally. So yeah, I'm all in on it.
And let's see, another thing. So we talked about the music, we talked about the comic. I did want to talk about the audio drama that you made, Kadoja Sentient.
Yes.
And what was that process like? Getting like the right voice actors together and doing the whole recording. And was it even like? And was everyone like all in the same room, or was it all like separate people doing stuff on their own desktops?
Yeah, no. First of all, it was a total blast. And the nice thing about recording is I think you can do it both ways. So if I want to get really nerdy on Sentient, I had some good friends of mine, Lori and Oscar Balderrama, read a couple of the parts there for Sentient. And then, I just did the narration and stuff like that. And then, our again, good friend Stephen Schilling came in and read a part. And the thing was, I went over to Lori and Oscar's house and read that with them, right? I set up all the mics and stuff. And then Stephen Schilling came over to my house and did it. And then we had Kyle Yount on it as well. And he did his stuff remotely and then sent it in. Okay. But same thing, we kind of gave notes. And so no, it was a blast. It's amazing how well it comes off. I mean, the audio in general, when it comes to like specific stuff, audio nerds are always going to know. Just like back to the Big Tim Jones thing, audio nerds know that it's not a band from the 70s, right?
Uh-huh.
But
Oh,
your job isn't to fool the experts, right? Your job is to fool the non-experts.
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So anyway.
No, go ahead.
Yeah,
Continue.
it was good. It was fun, and in fact, again, to mention the book that's going to be out in like a week, Declassified. We're doing it again. Stephen
nice.
Schilling. Yeah, Stephen Schilling is actually doing a part in Kadoja Declassified.
Okay.
And then let's see, who else did I get to do it? So I got Chris Williams to read the part of Williams. That is not an accident, because Williams is modeled on my buddy Chris Williams, a.k.a. Ruckus, in the band Big Pimp Jones.
Oh, okay.
So it was nice to have the namesake of Williams kind of read a few lines. And then I also got my wife to read the lines of Jenny Cruz.
Oh, nice.
And that's good, because Jenny Cruz is loosely based on my wife.
Oh,
right?
wow.
So
that's awesome.
Yeah. So no, that's fun. So it was fun to get a couple people in there, and I take a shot at a few voices too, just because we were a little pressed for time. But same thing. So yeah, I mean, a couple of them. Obviously, my wife is reading the stuff in my studio, and then Chris read his stuff from his house, and Steve Schilling read his stuff from his, and we put it all together. And you can get around the remote stuff by giving people the cues, and then they're able to kind of act the scene out. And again, Steve Schilling, Chris Williams, man, they have talent, and they just need a little nudge, and they'll get pointed in the right direction.
And are most of them just personal friends you know in real life, or are some of them like people like who work in the business?
Yeah. Well, so obviously my nepotism to my family is just my family, but they, like my wife did a little high school drama, that kind of thing. I've done my share of drama, so I feel like I'll go toe to toe with that, And then Chris Williams, probably a little bit of nepotism is there as well. But Steve Schilling, we just met, and Steve has acted and done all kinds of stage and stuff like that. So I mean, Steve has acting chops. Or Steve, aka Steven, has acting chops, and so yeah, that stuff's wonderful to do, and hopefully I can act a little bit too.
Okay, then. Yeah, that's very cool. And it's like very nice that you happen to have these connections and know everybody personally, to have this very nice camaraderie when making this project. And I was going to ask if you were going to do another audio drama in the Kadoja universe, and I'm very happy to hear that you'll be doing one with the Declassified comic. Yeah.
That kind of came about from people that stopped by the table too, because people would see Sentient, and they would say, or they'd see the other CDs, and they'd be like, "Hey, is this the audiobook for Kadoja?" And then I'd say, "No, it's actually its own thing." And then we get to talking about it. But enough people said that to where I was like, it would be kind of cool to have a Kadoja thing where it's read along, and.
Yeah,
I haven't discounted the possibility of maybe doing that going forward, or if I get the time to go back and do it for Volume 1 and Volume 2. But obviously, I'd need to have the time for that. But I do really like the idea of audio dramas. They're fun as hell.
Oh, totally.
And I've done a little bit of new music for it as well. It's not quite enough music that would be a full album. It's probably about 20 minutes worth of music, and it's a lot different. But I like different. I like kind of. I don't want to just make the same record over and over.
Right. Yeah, you got to switch it up, every once in a while. And,
absolutely.
Recently I've become a big fan of audiobooks, and I've never heard of an audiobook for a comic before. So that'd be something very new and very interesting to see how that pans out.
Yeah, there's a company out there that does them. Well, there's multiple companies that do them, but yeah, there's some really good ones out there.
Okay, then.
And again, now I will say that when I thought of a lot of this stuff, or when we did a lot of this stuff, I kind of did it in a vacuum. It's not like it came from saying that person does it and I want to do it kind of thing. But yeah, a lot of people can have the same good idea at the same time.
Yeah, totally. And earlier before you mentioned that you got your wife involved in making doing the voice of General Cruz, and I am curious, what has been like your family and close friends opinion on the Kadoja project you have here, or are most of them aware of this side project of yours?
Oh yeah, I think so. I think so. I mean, obviously, my close family, my wife, my stepdaughters, they know all about it. They like having, they have fun with it.
Oh, that's very nice.
They, like they come visit me at shows, or they'll hang out at the table, or
Hmm.
the kids haven't ever been old enough to man the table while I maybe take a break. But my wife's done it before. We've done a show or two together where she'll sell the book. So no, I mean, if that's what you're asking, yeah, they're very supportive.
Okay.
I think when it comes to a lot of my friends that aren't through the comic world or the giant monster world,
Yeah.
in general, they know I do a comic.
Hmm.
But even people I work with, I tell them for my day job, I tell them I do a comic.
Hmm.
But that's kind of the end of it. Like that's, I don't know. That's good enough for me. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I like knowing them for who they are, and if the comic comes up and they want to talk a little bit about it, great. But I'm not gonna bring it up.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know if that answered your question.
Oh
But
no, it totally
yeah,
does. Yeah, I know what that's
Yeah.
like.
yeah, exactly. I mean, is that the way you are too?
Yeah,
There are
pretty
people
much.
where you're just, they're your friends, right? And comics
Yeah.
be damned.
Yeah, usually like anybody I know in like real life, if they happen to know I do a comic, most of them are usually intrigued. Because they don't know anybody. Like pretty much like nobody in my family has ever really done anything like novels or comics or music or anything involving the arts. I just mostly come from a family of blue collared workers, and most of their friends and family are of a similar class. So it's like me doing something so radically different that certainly gets a lot of people's attentions and gets them very curious anytime it's brought up.
Yeah.
Even here in
Yeah.
Japan, it's like I tell my older adult students is like, oh yeah, when they ask me, oh, what do you do for a hobby? It's like, oh, I make comics, and they're like, oh, because they don't know anybody who does that.
That's pretty wild. Yeah. I guess when you're in this group of people who create stuff, you feel like everybody and their mom writes a comic, right?
Okay, so
But then when you step outside, you realize that it's really pretty rare.
Yeah, it certainly is, because I have been and I'm still am in an area where I'm not really surrounded by creative people, at least like we're talking like artistic wise.
Yeah, that's tough, man. I mean, like, I don't know. I suppose it's not all that bad, but it is a bit wild, right? It's almost kind of like your sanctuary thing, right? And then obviously you have a network of people through the interwebs and through all those other things that you get to kind of reach out and get your creative vibes on with.
Totally, yeah. And I don't know where my creative vibes would even come from had I not met, people on YouTube or from G Fest or, any of those sort of avenues.
Yeah.
And let's see. The next thing I want to talk about is the distribution. So I know that you initially published the first volume of Kadoja independently, and then eventually you were approached by 215 Inc., who then later picked up your comic and distributed it to this day, with Diamond distributing only the first 6 issues of Kadoja. Am I correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, so what was the process like of having a publisher come to you? Because I think among my friends, this is probably like the first time I've ever heard this happen before.
Yeah, it was awesome. I mean, again, it was kind of another example of I wasn't even there. This was when Lance and Rory got approached by 215 because we were tabling near them at New York Comic Con a long time ago.
Okay.
And we had just funded, I mean, Mike from 215 tells me this now, that, we had just funded the Kickstarter for the hardcover of Kadoja Volume 1. So if anybody out there has the hardcover, that thing's super rare. Like, there are not many of those because we had intended to print up, hundreds of them, right? We were going to use the Kickstarter money for that.
Yeah.
And then 215 happened. And so anyway, Lance wanted to print up a few extra hardcovers because it was kind of timed out with the show. And so he printed up those, and then it had this graphic on the front that just caught Mike and all the guys at 215 Inc.'s eye at the time. And so they bought a copy, and then before you know it, one thing led to another, and we're on 215. But more importantly, we couldn't, we had to start over with issue 1. So that meant selling through what we have and not reprinting it. So we did the first wave of printing stuff, and then just use that money in other ways to kind of get Kadoja ready for 215. Anyway, so no, it was really interesting, and it was super cool to get approached. Now that I'm part of 215, I will say that, we go out there, and one of my favorite things to do at shows when I get a moment is to go walk Artist Alley and see if we can find the next book that 215 is going to publish.
Oh, nice.
And not only that, but I'm going to WonderCon in a few weeks because it's in my backyard, and I'm not tabling there because I didn't get in, but I have my pro badge, so I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go there one day. I'm going to walk Artist Alley and talk to some people and see what happens, right? I mean, and this is the thing too. This is. Maybe this is something that's helpful to anybody out there that wants to make comics and publish comics and have them out in the world. The barrier of tabling at a convention is a substantial one, right? Because that shows that you're out there hustling and putting in the work to sell your own book, right? And when it comes to any kind of comics, I don't know if this was a question you had kind of queued up for later or anything like that, but when you sign with a comic company, the work doesn't stop. It's in a way it's just starting, because even places, even publishers like Image, which is like the dream of all indie comic creators, Image might really promote the hell out of your first issue, but after that, it's just in the Image catalog,
because,
and it comes to you.
Only only Image number one, only issue ones are considered a top priority, and from what I've heard from my friends, it's anything past that is you got to do the work yourself, especially.
Exactly. Yeah.
For them, anything that's not in issue one doesn't sell, and unfortunately, that's just the way the American comic industry is at the moment.
Yes, which also means for anybody out there listening who likes to invest in comics that are going to go up in value, you buy issue 2s and 3s, party people, because those are the ones that really go up in value, right? If you have some book like Walking Dead or something like that, not that number one's worthless, but the print run of a number 2 issue is almost always 1/5 of the number 1, right? So if that book ever takes off, it's the number 2 and 3 that are going to be in demand, because number 4, by the time number 1 comes out and does well, they can adjust orders for number 4.
Right. And
you know what I mean? But anyway, I'm geeking out.
So with Diamond, they distributed all 5 issues of the first volume to all the comic stores across the nation, right?
Yes. And
they only distributed the first issue of volume 2 to all the comic stores, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so how does 215 Inc. distribute issues 2 through 5 of Volume 2?
Yeah, that's a good question. The answer is we just sell them at shows, right? Okay. That's what we decided to do.
Okay, then. Sell them in person at conventions and stuff like that.
Yes. And I mean, we've had plenty of people come to us at shows and say, oh, I was wondering where these were because I could only get number 1 through Diamond of Volume 2, effectively number 6, right? And I mean, Diamond has their reasons. I don't know what they are, but yeah, so you get them through us.
Okay.
And I'm not sure if we're going to do the individual issues through Diamond for Volume 3, but we'll see. I know people that often indie comics people that will just release the first as a strategy, right, and then go from there, right? Okay. Because you can get a lot of interest in the issue 1, and then like you just said, with issue 2, it's kind of like you're on your own, right? And so a lot of people choose to not go through Diamond for issues after number 1.
And for digital distribution, what has been your 215's preferred choice?
Yeah, and well, I mean, it's funny because you were just mentioning Diamond, and you'll notice that one thing that I didn't say just now is we just went to another distributor, right? Because there aren't any. because it's kind of diamond or bust, right?
Right.
And with comics, I mean, Kadoja's books, 215 books, they're on Comixology,
Okay.
which is very nice. I will say that. So, I mean, I know a lot of people are on Comixology. Comixology is a easy way to just read a book, which we're appreciative of, and 215 does pretty well through Comixology, which is nice. I will say that for people that are interested in maybe an expanded experience, that there's this new platform out right now called Nanitz, and it was the name of a comic company, and it is a top-down scrolling reader where you just kind of thumb from the bottom and swipe up repeatedly, and it presents. So I say this because Kadoja Volume 1 is on the Nanitz platform now. And what they do is they kind of break out the layers of the art so it has a 3D effect.
You know what?
Right? You have this really cool.
That's probably what I was talking about when I mentioned like the sort of pseudo motion comic.
Yeah, it's awesome. And the other thing that they have, which is something that I've been waiting for people to have, is they have music. Oh. And the cool thing about Kadoja is, like, they insisted on writing their own music to it. Okay. So I'm sitting there thinking, like, dude, I have, I think Big Pimp Jones has done a grand total of like 4 CDs of music for Kadoja. Yeah. But they're like, no, we just want that to vibe your style. So it was, kind of like to the point of when you were talking about working with other people. Yeah. Where people are just asking for my permission to do something they want and then kind of incorporate my monster into their story. Yeah. Same thing here. They just want to write the music. And it's really fun to listen to music that someone else did for your book that's trying to stay true to what you did, but also be an expression of their own creativity. So, yeah, man, I love reading books, but specifically, it was fun to read Kadoja.
Okay,
on the Nanitz reader. Yeah. So no, super cool. Again, Comixology is great. I mean, they're the industry leader, and Nanitz reader is again a fun way to take a kind of expanded experience of a comic that makes it a bit more, I suppose, cinematic, and also I think encourages rereadability.
Okay. I was going to mention, have you or 215 Inc. ever thought about going through Kindle, considering like Kindle seems to be like almost everywhere in terms of ebooks?
Yeah, I think we have. I feel like we were, and maybe something happened, but I can't remember. That was a little bit before my time when I was kind of part of the editorial team at 215.
Okay, then.
But it's something I would look into. Okay. But yeah, I think there's something about Kindle that was prohibitive before, but I have to look at it.
Okay, because from what I've done, I have done some research because I've thought about like if I cannot print enough copies for everybody to of Draco Azul, because I live here in Japan, and so if I have to ship out a physical copy to someone who wants to buy it, that's like $20 for every comic I would have to ship. So I'm thinking like digital distribution, because I'm going to go this like independent wise, for the time being. I'm thinking like digital distribution is the easiest, more convenient way. Outside of selling physical copies at certain shows, like you said, like you. And I did some research. I did notice, like, ever since Amazon bought Comixology, now I've noticed all the big people, like Marvel and DC, whenever they have a comic on Amazon, they have it simultaneously distributed through Comixology and Kindle at the same time. Yeah, so I guess, like, if you buy one digital copy from either format, you get both formats at the same time, I suppose.
Hey man, I guess it's good to be one of the biggest comic companies, right? Because I mean, they that's just another built-in advantage they have.
Yeah, and I've had actually I have a small experience with Kindle where Matt Danian and we co-wrote a mini comic together featuring like detective noir versions of Atomic Rex and Draco Azul in a sort of...
That's right, I remember that.
Yeah, in a sort of like Monsters Inc. style world. And so we released that through Kindle, and that one was pretty good. And haven't tried Comixology though, so I am curious to know what that whole process is like. So I wonder if like anybody can distribute a comic through Kindle or Kindle and Comixology at the same time. But if I find out, I'll certainly let you know.
Yes. The answer is yes, you can. You just need to choose your lead time accordingly. Right, that you can do that, but it might take a couple months between the time you submit it and the time that it's available on the platform.
Right. Okay then, and let's see. So we talked about that, and so I do want to know that since you've been working with 215 Inc., what has I am curious to know what your overall thoughts are on the current comic book industry here in America. Where do you think it may be going in the future? Because I know there's been a lot of discussion recently about comics, at least mainstream comic companies, slowly losing money over time. And I'm wondering, I've been curious myself as to where all of this is eventually going to go in the near future. Or
where do you think it's going to go? I'm interested in what you have to say.
I've heard people talk about indie comics potentially rising from the ashes of the bigger comic companies and perhaps like learning from their failings and like perhaps comics becoming, it's like every year I see comics as becoming more and more of a niche product for the mainstream audiences, and I always compare that to how comics are sold in Japan, where it seems like comics seem to be more readily available and more widely consumed than they are in America. And another big difference I would see is where Japan, they produce more content at a faster rate than America does, but at the same time, these like manga writers and artists are like, working to the bone, working like they're putting their blood, sweat, and tears into everything and being like absolutely exhausted with almost no time to rest. So it's like I'm comparing the two countries and how they approach comics. And like seeing the sort of supposed decline of American comics, I still feel like comics will always be there, but I really feel like comics would need to do something radically different to have a much wider appeal. And I still feel like there is still a market there for comics. I just feel like perhaps it's all in like the way they distribute. Perhaps like maybe focusing so much time and energy on stores that only sell comics and nothing else besides like, t-shirts and figurines. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's not the way to go. Maybe it's like they could take a page from the manga industry and where like they would sell comics at like convenience stores, at bookshops, at game stores, retail stores. Like I practically see manga being sold everywhere in Japan. So it's like it's either a combination of like, wider distribution or like a more heavier emphasis on digital distribution. But I still feel like another thing is with Marvel Comics, especially, and DC Comics, they feel like they try to bite off more than they can chew, where they're having like so many issues, so many crossover events, and not everyone is going to be able to buy all of that product. So it's like they're almost sort of like becoming their own competition, where they're putting more emphasis on certain stories or certain characters over others. So it's like it's eating. These bigger companies are eating themselves alive. If that makes any sense.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I mean, so what you've asked is the kind of thing that's probably a 3-beer conversation one night, right? So I'm going to do my best to condense what let me form a coherent point in my head before I drive to something.
And I apologize if I was rambling, if I was too rambling.
No. You've said everything. It's a really big question, right? So let's see. So you initially asked, where do I think comics are going? Yeah. And my answer is I don't know, right? As an indie comic
there's that
person,
siren I told you about.
See, there you go. That's fun. I can't hear it at all. I can't hear it.
That's good.
But I mean, the listeners can, but I can't. But So yeah, I think it's gonna kind of stagger around in its current form for a while, but I think so. Like I'm pretty decent friends with the retailer of the shop that so of my shop, and we've talked a bunch about the state of the industry. Sorry, I held the microphone for a second.
No problem.
We've talked a bunch about the state of the industry, and so where I think it's going, I don't think it's going to be that different. I think that the Marvel DC thing, I mean, it's what retailers worry about, I think the retailer, like, I don't want to say the retailers are to blame. I want to say that the system is set up. Okay, I'm going to make an analogy, right? By being in a band that makes original music, kind of a thorn in my side are cover bands. And for anybody listening out there, for anybody, like, I don't really blame cover bands, right? Because it comes from people. So bar owners or club owners want people to show up, and they want people to dance, and they want people to drink, right? And an indie band and playing their originals may not be able to guarantee that, right? Where a cover band can guarantee that. And so the bar owners are making a logical decision to bring patrons in, and the patrons are showing up and drinking and dancing. And if the people were to demand something different, then the bar owners would be forced to react, right? And so I'm going to bring that back over to comics now and say that as long as the people want superhero comics, then everything is fine. Or everything, I'm not going to say fine, but the current state will stagger around but be enough to persist, right? And so again, I don't know if I'm even forming a coherent point right now, but what you say about Japanese comics is interesting. But there was one thing that that was kind of popping up in my head repeatedly when you said that, to kind of go Scott McCloud on this whole situation. I think comics are successful in Japan not simply because of the distribution, but because the people have shown that they want to read comics, right? And people want to read comics because the publishers have gotten it right. And the publishers have gotten it right because they don't make comics that are just superheroes, right? Like,
there's something literally for everyone.
Exactly. And that's why, in my opinion, that's why the Japanese comic market is so robust and the American one is so troubled, because Americans just can't get past a comic shop having something other than superheroes in it. And I get it. There are definitely all types of comics. You and I write a certain type of comics that isn't superheroes, right? I just read a great book by Drawn and Quarterly called Pyongyang, which is an animation guy who was in North Korea for 2 months. Fantastic comic, right? It's amazing, and it's a travelogue. It's like a 2-month autobiography. It's incredible, but like those comics get ignored here, right? Not that people don't read them at all. It's just that the people, like, fans can order them and they'll get them. But, this kind of comes back to the retailers too. Like, maybe it's because there isn't much of a direct market in Japan, where in the US there is a direct market. And, I told my shop owner the other day, I happened to go pick up my comics, and I was asking her, because I was talking about being in indie comics and talking about how much of a struggle publishing indie comics can be sometimes. And while I love doing it, you don't do it for money, kind of like we were talking about with making your own comics. Right. And I said, if you have $10 left over at the end of the month and you want to take a chance, or $10 at the end of the day, right? And you want to buy more inventory for your shelf, what are you buying? Are you buying 2 issues of Kadoja to get out there and hope people get it? Or are you getting 2 issues of Spider-Man, right? And it's like, she obviously said Spider-Man, right? And that's the thing. It's kind of like, I suppose it's kind of like a big catch-22, right? Like the retailers, everybody's making the best decision they can, right?
Mm-hmm.
The retailers are spending their money in a way that they think is smart, right? I'm going to use this extra money for Spider-Man or for, Captain Marvel this month because there's a movie out, or for whatever reason. And the fans are buying what's on the shelves, and there are some indie fans out there, but you can see that like it doesn't quite add up to the sum of the parts. And I think the core issue is diversity. And I think the core issue kind of comes down to the publishers and what people expect from the publishers.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I didn't answer the question, but
it's like all he wanted was a yes or no question. No, I'm just kidding.
All he wanted was a yes or no. So yeah, I mean, again, what I see happening is I see the market staying almost the same over the next 5 years or so.
Yeah.
I think the threat of doom of the superhero guys, not existing anymore will be there, but. The good news is, like I just got my previews for the month, and it's weird because Marvel and DC now insist on having their own previews. So when you buy Diamond Previews, there's no longer a Marvel or a DC section, but it's kind of refreshing because now it starts with Image. And again, Image is, they're too popular and too well funded to be called indie, but they are in theory indie, right? Even from their origins. And Dark Horse is the second publisher, and then IDW, so like those are the heavyweights now in a previews, and I only hope that makes the diversity in comics go up, and more importantly makes comic readers that much more used to expecting diversity from their publishers and realizing that there's a broad spectrum of things that can be told as comics just like they are in Japan.
Right. And I do find it very interesting looking at, you mentioned diversity. I'm thinking of like the recent business strategy Marvel and DC are approaching where they're trying to tell different kinds of stories within their own superhero comics. And I'm wondering if like with Japanese comics, there's always something for everyone where it's like, this is a comic that's specifically aimed at this demographic who's into this particular style of storytelling. Whereas with Marvel comics, I'm wondering if they're trying to do a thing where they're trying to appeal to everyone and appealing to no one as a result. What's that phrase? What was it? Jack of all trades, master of none. I'm wondering if that can potentially be a hindrance to the big two.
Probably. Yeah, I mean, I would think so, right? I mean, again, to use music as an example, if Wu-Tang Clan did a metal album, would you care?
Probably not. Or
I would.
I'd probably be initially interested. I'd be curious to see how it turned out.
Exactly. But in general, like while I would, so Wu-Tang Clan, if you're listening, I would love to hear a metal record from you where you like rhyme over metal or something like that. It would be like new metal. Yeah, please. But like the odds are that it's going to be an awkward and stilted metal record. Right. And I think if you're, again, I'm not following it that much, but if you're saying that Marvel is trying to tell different stories, but with the same characters, then it's like,
or having new characters replace the classic characters that everyone already likes.
Yeah. But I mean, if you're trying to tell me you're going to do historical fiction, but it's going to be with Doctor Strange, then I have bad news. It's still a Doctor Strange book, no matter what you're trying to do with it. But yeah, so I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like Marvel's kind of helping themselves and hurting themselves at the same time. But, it's...
Only time will tell.
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, Marvel has their... I mean, if you had... Again, this is one of those put yourself in their shoes, right? If you had their stable of characters, why would you do anything different?
Right. But I have a feeling that like you can only go on for so long before you start to repeat yourself. And I guess that's another major difference between American comics and Japanese comics is that Japanese comics, with the few exceptions like Dragon Ball or One Piece, they eventually have to end at some point.
Absolutely.
And then, only for it to be replaced by the next big thing that comes out. Whereas with American comics, they just try to, stretch that on for as long as possible. In fact, like when I tell my students that like these sort of superhero movies came from comics and these comics have been going on since like the 60s or even the 30s, they're like, what?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, because for them, it's like only one comic is only ever written and drawn by one dude or maybe two people on a rare scenario. Whereas with like Spider-Man, there's like a crazy amount of people who have written and drawn Spider-Man over the years. So like, there's never just one version of Spider-Man, unlike there's always been like one version of Goku or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. And again, here it's all about making money, right?
Yeah.
And making money a certain way. And I'm sure in Japan it's also about making money.
Yeah.
But they treat their comics like book publishers treat their novels, right? That it becomes about, or they, you get allied to creators, right? Where it's like Stephen King writes a novel. Here's the new Stephen King novel. Neil Gaiman writes a novel. Okay, here's the new Neil Gaiman novel. It's not American Gods 2, right? It's another novel written by Neil Gaiman.
Right, right.
And comics did that for a little bit, right? Because Neil Gaiman comes from comics. And he told different stories. And, you did kind of have that author as the star thing. And I think in Japan, it tends to work a little bit more like that, right? But more importantly, there's just enough people doing it where and the readership is open enough to it where you can tell all kinds of stories. And
True.
I don't know. I hope we achieve that potential here. But when the market, the people who are in control of the market are not interested in seeing that. You know what I mean? So
at least for now.
It's not, like the biggest players in the comics market all benefit by things going exactly how they are right now. So we will see how that pans out over time.
Very true. And the last question I have for you, since we're almost approaching the 2-hour mark here, is...
Yeah, man, for those of you that have listened this far, congratulations.
This is actually kind of the norm for my channel.
Oh, that's okay.
So I've asked you about the future of the comic book industry. I'd like to know, what do you think is for the future of Giant Monster Entertainment, especially with the movies? In the past we've had... you mentioned Cloverfield, there's been Pacific Rim, there's been the legendary Godzilla Monsterverse, there's been Shin Godzilla, the Godzilla anime, some indie stuff on the side. So it's like, do you think the giant monster genre that you and I love so much is going to get any bigger or smaller in the coming years?
What do you think?
I feel like, let's see, I'm very concerned with the Japanese side of things, because I feel like with Shin Godzilla, like, I personally was a huge fan of the movie, and I feel like a lot of that movie's success was done under the leadership of someone with a very unique creative vision. But then, like, I'm not sure, like, I don't really trust Toho so much these days, only because it's like they're nowhere near like the powerhouse of a movie studio it was back in its heyday, or even back like 20 or so years ago, back in the 90s. I just feel like the studio system in Japan is very limited in what they can do. I feel like creatively and like budget wise, and I feel like I'm not sure if they're able to replicate the success of Shin Godzilla with their planned quote unquote world of Godzilla. So it's where they just want to make a movie every year, and I feel like the vibe I get from Toho is that they saw what how Hollywood handled Godzilla and how they made it into a success and made Godzilla relevant again, and I get a feeling that Japan is like the studio Toho got very jealous, and they say, "Oh, well, I'm going to take my character back. Thank you very much, and I'm going to try to do what you did," out of some sort of like jealousy, sort of, where I can feel like this is our character. Why should we let them hog all the glory? And maybe they would try to do the same thing that Hollywood did with the legendary films, and that may prematurely end the Monsterverse. I'm not sure if Warner Brothers has any plans of continuing the Monsterverse with or without Godzilla. I mean, there's still technically King Kong, and maybe they might make some more monster remakes or original monster movies that are part of that universe. But I'm really not sure. if, whether two Godzillas can exist on both sides of the Pacific Ocean at the same time, or is Toho going to hinder one cinematic universe and create a subpar universe in its place? So it's just like, I just don't have enough confidence personally in Toho themselves.
Mm-hmm. No, that makes sense. I mean, I kind of think that's been the cycle of Toho over the years too, right? That, I mean, let's think about this. So TriStar comes, so Godzilla, Toho does a job. Actually, we could go back further than that, right? Mm-hmm. We can go back to 84. So in 84, the real reason, or not the real reason, but one of the big reasons that there was an American Godzilla movie was that I believe that's when the economic crisis in Japan happened. The movie studio shut down, and then you kind of had this resurgence of, hey, let's kind of get this Godzilla thing going again, right? And then after that, spurred on, I think, by how well at least 84 put Godzilla back on the map. That's when Toho took a shot with a couple of the 80s films, right? And then the 90s, and you could probably argue that maybe coming out of the economic crisis, I don't know my Japan economic history that well, but the fact that there weren't that many movies in the 80s tells me that maybe they weren't on firm economic footing just yet. But then you get to the 90s, and all of a sudden there's a big influx of Godzilla films again. And they kind of, have a lot of success on the Toho Japan side. And then America's like, yeah, we're going to do this Godzilla film, right? TriStar. And then, they throw money at Toho. And then Toho basically shuts down their universe, right? So that everything can.
They were more than happy. They were more than happy to accept that paycheck and support 89 up until its release.
Exactly.
Then they made an about face.
Yep. And then after that, the about face was, you guys don't know what the hell you're doing. Let us show you how to do Godzilla films again, right? And so then they did that. And then let's see, that was really the last American movie up until 2014. Right. But kind of the same thing with 2014, right? I mean, there was
a recent quote where it's like, we're not going to bow down to the Hollywood version or something along those lines.
Yeah. But also there's a similarity to 84. But not 90, but not TriStar, in that the Godzilla franchise was kind of on life support because Final Wars happened in 2004. Right. And then that was it. Right. And then the next movie was really Godzilla 14. I don't think I'm missing any. I don't think.
Nope.
Yeah. There's no Toho films or anything. Right.
So IDW Comics.
Yeah. Again, and just like, kind of keeping the flame alive there, IDW, right? And then that comes back out, and then Toho, to your point, kind of sees dollar signs this time, kind of like they did maybe after 84. Right. And now they're like, hey, we want to get back in the game here, and we're going to do Shin, and we're going to do this anime, and, we're going to do all these things. So, yeah, I mean, who knows, right? It does feel like, I guess, to answer your initial question, I suppose you asked, is it going to get bigger or smaller? And my answer is it's, kind of like with American comics, I'm just having a hard time seeing it being anything other than the same. I think there will be, I think it's
an oversaturation followed by a lull.
Yeah. But I think studios are now smart enough to know that there's a right level of saturation, and I think they've settled into like this cadence of giant monster films from them that's going to roughly keep on playing out, right? Where it's an American film every couple of years, because that's the American cycle. And then maybe in between the American film, there's a Toho Japanese film or something like that. Yeah. And I don't know how much they're going to oversaturate, but the fans will definitely let them hear it if they think they're oversaturating. I mean, I think a great example of that is the Star Wars franchise, right? Where fans just didn't show up for Solo because they'd have, and like I saw Solo, I thought it was fine. I mean, I didn't think it was great. I didn't think it was terrible. It was watchable. It had groaners, and it had tons of redeeming moments.
Had stuff in it.
Exactly. It was a film that involved Star Wars, so it was fine.
Yeah.
But people are fatigued, with just that much Star Wars.
Mhm. Only
So
five,
yeah,
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 only 5 months after the last one.
yeah, exactly. It's like,
And
man,
we
don't
already
you? Yeah,
know
please.
how much of how well that last film panned over with fans in general. Even speaking as
Yeah,
someone who generally liked The Last Jedi.
yeah. Oh, I actually really like The Last Jedi.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I understand why
I'm
people have issues with it, but but I still enjoy it. I don't have a problem with most of it.
Yeah, I kind of don't understand why people have issues with it. I mean,
Hmm.
from what I've heard, the general consensus on the issues people have, like the issues I have with it are not
Uh-huh.
the issues that what I hear are the main things, right? That's
Uh-huh.
like, well, Luke isn't really Luke. What else?
Yeah, I don't
Like,
have that. Doesn't bother me.
yeah, yeah. I
Yeah,
mean, what else are the big? I don't even
I
know what
think
the other big
it's mostly
criticisms
just
are.
like anything involving why am I blanking on the character's name? Um,
Finn.
yeah, Finn. Anything involving Finn and his band kind of was like a waste of time in the grand scheme of things.
Hmm. I could definitely understand
Yeah,
that.
the whole casino
Um,
thing and getting the
yeah, well,
dude.
I was going to say, okay, so if that's one of the big criticisms, yeah, I found the whole casino thing to be one of the more pointless sidetracks of any Star Wars film ever, right?
Yeah.
But then again, I don't know. I don't know. I don't have that much of a problem with it. Like, I didn't think the Phantom Menace was as bad as everybody else. I
And
think
right now you just upset a whole bunch of people on the internet right now.
that's well, I mean, but they were upset anyway. Like, they hate the
True.
Phantom Menace, and it's like fine, like
Yeah.
I don't know.
You do your
That's
thing, I'll do my thing.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, I've had conversations like this before,
Mm.
and I think so. So, like, I happen to hate The Force Awakens,
Okay.
and
Interesting.
yeah, and the fact that I hate The Force Awakens but like Phantom Menace
Uh-huh.
simply tells you what I value in creativity, right?
Yeah, I
So
can see
the
that.
reason I like the Phantom Menace
Hmm.
is that it, like people say that, like, and look, there's a lot of indications that like Lucas was maybe mailing it in on some spots in the new trilogy or whatever, but
Yeah.
like I actually, like, I respect the ambition, right? Like
Hmm.
what Phantom Menace amounts to is a grand ambition executed poorly,
Hmm.
right? Or at least poorly in spots. And when you look at Force Awakens, what you have is a very what did I say, grand ambition? So the opposite,
Hmm.
a very small ambition, low ambition film
Hmm.
executed well, right? Like it's
Ah.
so I think it's and like, look, there's a lot of stuff about like The Force Awakens that's really good. Like the acting in it is really good.
Hmm.
The dialogue in it is good, but like
Hmm.
the overall story, the overall plot
Hmm.
just bores the hell out of me, right?
Hmm.
And but if you look at Phantom Menace, I think the overall plot of the trilogy, the prequel trilogy, is really interesting and ambitious. It's
Hmm.
just that the execution wasn't there, right? But
Hmm.
anyway, that's my 2 cents on it. That's
Okay.
fine.
Yeah. And let's see. I guess you mentioned before, like going back to Godzilla, you mentioned oversaturation, and yeah, if there can be like a happy medium between the Japanese and American films, I feel like that could be the best situation overall. Uh,
Yeah,
and I just really hope that Toho is making these movies because the 2014 film reinvigorated their passion for the character, not just because they see dollar signs. Although I'm pretty sure that's mostly going to be it, looking at it
yeah,
realistically. And
yeah.
it's funny thing, I saw another situation like this happen recently where, there's I'm not sure how familiar you are with Pokemon, but there's that new live action Pokemon movie coming out this in May.
Yes.
And for whatever reason, now in Japan, they're remaking the very first Pokemon movie, but in all CG animation now. So I'm thinking,
Oh,
were they jealous of the Hollywood movie, so they want to make their own CG-filled Pokemon movie?
that's very possible. But I always like trying to put myself in their position,
Uh,
and I think from Toho's point of view and maybe from the Pokemon point of view, I
uh,
think like you could explain it in saying they didn't think the interest in their character was as high as it was, right?
uh,
and I think it's, to me, it just feels like simple capitalism, right? That like, you know, like an American studio says we want to make a Godzilla film. Okay, sure, go for it. What do we care? You know, like, yeah, go make your film. Nobody cares about Godzilla anymore, right?
True.
And then the film does well, and it's like, wait a minute, people care about Godzilla now? Because like, I'm the owner of Godzilla, so I should get out there and make some Godzilla films and really capitalize on this. And I think, look, based on kind of following you on Facebook, and it seems like every other day you're in some cool new Godzilla pop-up thing or a little store or, you know, something that's showing the love for Godzilla again. And to me, that's Toho kind of realizing that, like, wait a minute, I have a franchise people care about that maybe I've been underexposing over these years.
I that is true. Although I can always feel like, you know, the Japanese, they're really big on like pride. I can always feel like there's some sort of like a bit of like an ego thing in there as well. Where it's like, yeah, like this is our character. We have to prove we know Godzilla better than anyone else.
Yeah, exactly.
And sort of becomes just sort of this like cinematic dick measuring contest as to who can handle Godzilla the best. You know, it's like, especially you can easily tell it with the size of Godzilla. It's like, our Godzilla is what is it? Bigger than the 90s Godzilla. Well, Shin Godzilla is bigger than Hollywood Godzilla. And then you have like the anime Godzilla is 300 meters tall, the biggest Godzilla.
Exactly. And you're like, what a coincidence. In the new American film, it's 301 meters tall.
And then they're like, Nani?
Exactly. Oh, and then Japan's like, did I mention 300 because we really meant 302? It was right here. And then America's like, well, that's funny. Did I mention 301 because I really meant 303? So anyway, yeah.
Here's the thing. America can make a big budget Godzilla movie because, you know, America's got like their Hollywood system is like perhaps like probably the biggest in the world, but
yeah, Japan
being like a mere fraction. It looks like I don't think they can perhaps like. I really think that Toho is the kind of company that would be able to end up finding itself in a situation where it would like bite off more than it can chew budget wise.
Yes.
I mean, totally. Like Shin Godzilla itself was only like less than $15 million as opposed to like what the like 100 something million dollars of Godzilla 14.
Yeah, exactly. What's the new one, like 150 or 160, right? Like it's
150, 160. And again, looking at Shin, a mere 15.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the comic stuff, you know, it'll be interesting to see where it goes.
Yeah. I mean, again, and also like the comic stuff, I think it's just, you know, the people that have the franchises are the people that have the money, and you know, we kind of see what's going to happen from there. You know, I think for me the more interesting question about giant monster stuff, not that isn't an interesting question, but let me rephrase the one that I asked myself is, and it doesn't really have anything to do with Kadoji, even though it may sound like I say it in a second. Are there room for other giant monster stories? Right?
That's a big important question.
Yeah, and it's like, you know, I think clearly. Like it was real interesting for that minute where we thought Pacific Rim as a franchise might overtake Godzilla.
I was so hoping for that.
Well, Pacific Rim 2 sucked, right?
Yes,
and that's, you know, that's the problem. I mean, they kind of had this potential star moment and kind of botched it, you know, And again, I'm not that up on some of this news, but I remember when Pacific Rim 2 got announced, it was like, oh my God, this is so great. Like, there's this film that people loved and you can get a second film. And then there was going to be this animated series and there was going to be, you know, this new prequel comic series. And it's like, yeah, well, then what happened was the comic book came out and it was terrible. No, right?
I barely heard anything about it.
Oh, I tried 2 issues and I just couldn't get through it, you know? And I mean, maybe I didn't give it a chance, but yeah, I'm not going to keep on paying $4 an issue for something that's not good, right? And
obviously they kicked out Del Toro out of the project.
Yeah, so then that
was the heart of that.
And then the second movie comes out, and while there's some cool things in the second movie, in general, there's just a lot wrong with it to me.
Yeah.
And I think the world agreed because it didn't do well and it wasn't reviewed that well.
Not even China could save it this time.
Exactly. And then, I guess
was
the animated
co-funded
series
by China, I think.
Yeah, and well, yeah, they pandered so hard to China in it too, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then of course the I don't think the animated series ever happened, and just like that,
Yeah.
all their momentum was gone.
Yeah. And it was sucked because when the first movie came out, I said to myself, this has the potential of being like the next Star Wars in terms of like original cinematic franchises.
Yeah, yeah, and then there's I again kind of for the same Phantom Menace reason, I admire when people at least take big swings because big swings don't happen that much anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Like I mean, like I think of the movie Valerian too, right? Which I couldn't sit through more than 5 minutes of.
Uh-huh.
But at least they took a shot, like they're trying to create like a new universe, a new mythos, a new whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not just living in the same 17 franchises that we've been with for our whole life,
Right.
So yeah, no, it's a shame because Pacific Rim really did have a lot of promise. And, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if 4 years from now, somebody's like, wait a minute, I can tell a Pacific Rim story, and maybe it comes back and they give it another go. You just never know.
And as for monster stuff, it's like still superheroes are like the reigning champ at the box office, but I feel like giant monsters are like slowly keeping like a good, like a steady performance in Hollywood, where it's like they're not the biggest moneymakers, but they're still relatively decent moneymakers.
Yes.
So they're able to sneak by without any sort of like, are they failing or, oh, they're the new trend. They're somewhere in the middle there, just, scooting by as all the other bigger movies around them are, taking up the spotlight. Kong Skull Island still made a lot of money. Rampage still made a decent amount of money.
Yeah. Because giant monsters are cool.
Yeah.
Like
Meg made a decent amount of money as well.
Yeah, like people like giant monsters as a concept, and I think that's the thing that's always going to save giant monster stuff is that it's a cool concept.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I don't know. I think there will always be a spot for them because they're always an idea. Like a lot of people, like in our you and I are talking, and the kind of people that are going to be listening to this are diehard giant monster fans, right? So to us, the world looks a little different than to everybody else. But like a lot of people like giant monsters, and they'll go turn out for like a movie, and that's probably about all they will do. But there, again, a lot of people really dig Godzilla. A lot of people really dig giant monsters and think they're cool. So I think because of that, it's always good to know that they'll always have a place. How big that place is, I think, remains to be seen. You got to figure people are going to get tired of superhero movies at some point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But you never know.
Yeah.
I mean, then again, I say that, but I went to see Aquaman. I'm going to see Shazam. I don't know about Captain Marvel yet. We'll see.
Yeah. I'm definitely going to, now that Spider-Man Enter the Spider-Verse is finally in Japan, I'm going to see it for the second time.
Oh my God! Yeah, I forgot to mention that. That movie is awesome.
Yeah, you know what the crazy thing is? For whatever reason, there are, even despite the fact that it just came out in Japan, there are no English dub screenings in my city at all.
What a bummer! Yeah.
I mean, like once this podcast is over, I'm gonna have to take a train to Nagoya just to see Spider-Man in English.
Yeah, or you can try to order it order it to show up at your I know you still have people that like family that live here, man. It's out on Blu-ray in like 2 weeks. Oh yeah,
that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll just have to have them ship me over a copy of a Blu-ray in their next care package.
Yeah, exactly, dude. Again, it's out in like 2 weeks. I think you can buy it digitally now, although you probably can't because you'd have to figure out a way around it. But yeah, man, it's awesome. It's awesome.
So I believe that we have done enough serious discussion, but it's been a lovely 2 hours getting the chance to sit here and talk to you about everything under the sun, be it the comic industry, giant monster movies, individual creative projects, music, Space Jam, all of that stuff. And
yeah, man, it's been a good time.
So for the listeners at home, where can people find you and your body of work?
Oh yeah, well the easiest place for the comic is to go to 215inc.com, and then it's like K-O-D-O-J-A. You know what I mean? But just go to 215inc.com. We closed down the Kadoja site, and some creep, I don't know, overtook it. So don't ever click on that link. I'll just tell you to go to 215inc.com because that's the home of Kadoja.
Excellent. And where can people?
And then if you want to check out the music, then you can go to the Big Pimp Jones Bandcamp, and like all the Kadoja stuff is there. It's digital. You can check out, the music. You can listen to it and all that stuff, and then go from there.
Cool. Is your music available on iTunes, or is your comic available on Amazon?
I don't know if the comic's available. I think you can buy Volume 2 on Amazon as a trade paperback, and probably Volume 1 as well. I have to double check that.
All right, then, yeah. So,
and then Comixology, it's on that. It's obviously on Nanitz, which we talked about. There's a lot of ways to get it.
Excellent. And, excellent. And so you have like all the first 5 issues of Volume 1 all together in one convenient collection, and the Volume 2 paperback, so that's out now?
Yeah, out right now.
Okay, and where can people get the declassified issue?
That's a good question. I will probably have that online through. Oh yeah. Sorry, if you want to buy Kadoja, then there's a Store Envy store. So you can go just do a Google search or whatever for Kadoja and then Store Envy, and our store should pop up. And I will be adding declassified in a week once it's back from the printer.
Excellent then. And so I'll be sure to place all those links into the description of this video by the time you're listening this, ladies and gentlemen. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining us for the latest episode of the Shuwatch podcast. I have been your host, Andres Perez, aka Kaij Noir, and this has been my good friend, Mr. Keith Foster.
It has been a pleasure, man. Thank you for having me.
And it's been a pleasure. Believe me, the pleasure is all mine, man. So please support this guy, support Kadoja, support Big Pimp Jones any way you can. Let the internet know what you think about his projects, and just keep spreading the indie love for all creators and consumers of entertainment everywhere. So until next time, everybody, take care.